Hello everyone and welcome to another project with Frocks and Frolics. Today we're going to sew a little girl's bag called Mary Lou bag. There are 5 different ways to put the bag together. 2 of them include zip insertions and 3 of them don't. So in order to find the right bag for you, I would suggest that you watch the introductory video, and the link to that can be found at the end of this video. Let's get started with a monster bag. It's a simpler version without zip or purse feet, and I'm using iron-on vinyl for the flap because I wanted to put a little monster on it. The base of the bag is covered, and I think it looks really sweet if the base is constructed in a different material to the lining. Now I bet you had enough already of me waffling on about the bag, so let's get started. To make the bag you need some volume fleece, iron-on vinyl, some fabric for the lower part of the bag, fabric for the upper part of the bag, a really nice third contrast lining, a flexible cutting board which you can get from IKEA or Asda, some matching thread, and of course you need the magnetic closure. Now let's have a look at what we need cut out. We have the flap twice in the shell fabric, and I've also got my iron-on vinyl. Then I've got the lower part of the bag twice, don't forget to snip it where indicated, the upper part of the bag twice, and of course I've got the lining twice too. Now I've also cut some volume fleece. There's a separate pattern for that, for my flap. And here you can see me constructing the base, so the 2 base pieces need to be joined together with a little gap in the middle, and then right sides facing, they're placed together and sewn together with a 1 centimeter seam allowance, so you don't need to draw around it like you can see me do here. After I did this, I thought I just make an extra pattern piece for everyone, and I did. So all you have to do is your centimeter seam allowance, which is a little bit easier than working it out yourself. Was a bit of an afterthought. Cut back your seam allowance, and then you can turn your base cover and iron it really nice and flat. Next we're going to put in the base, so you have to bend the base a bit to get it in. It'll be a bit like tricky, but it's okay. It will go in. Just don't make that gap too small. And then if you like, you can sew it up on the back side there. Now we're going to do the handles. So iron them all to the middle and then one side over. And from the middle you want to iron on some vinyl. It's 2 centimeters wide, so that they are a little bit more stiff. In fact, you could laminate this and then you don't need the iron-on volume fleece. And now I'm going to top stitch this, and it'll be nice and strong. And when I top stitch this again, I use my fixed point and I make sure that the stitch length is on 3.5, so it's quite big. It looks really homemade if stitch length for top stitching is very small, so always remember that. The problem is I tend to forget to afterwards do the stitch length right down again, so don't forget to return to your stitch length of 2. Then iron on your volume fleece to the wrong side of the fabric with lots of steam. And then also we're going to iron on the vinyl, but we're going to place a little monster in the middle there, but I actually put the monster too high up. It needs to be lower down. If you're putting something in there, just make it 1 centimeter higher than the end so it's snug. And now we're going to put the fastening on, so you want to put your pattern right to the edge, not like I do here, not to the edge. That was a little bit too low, so move it right to the edge and then mark that spot. Take your magnetic popper, and then you can mark again how wide your legs are there, because depending on the popper size it'll be different for all the poppers, so otherwise you could have just snipped wherever the ends are from my markings. So give this a good snip, and then from the outside you can put your popper through, and there's a second part of the popper which is like a little plate which goes on top of the inside, and then you're going to force the little arms apart and it's inserted. Now I could have just put right sides together here and sewn the flap, but I decided to stitch all the way around my little monster with a triple stitch, which usually is used for stretch materials, but I really like this one. If you watch my videos regularly, you know that I'm really fond of this. It's the stitch that has like 3 little lines next to each other, and it comes with most sewing machines. In fact, I've never come across it that a machine didn't have it, and you can see here how lovely that looks. Now we're going to sew the flap together, right sides together obviously, and then we're leaving the end open, and you can sew around your volume fleece if you've ironed it in the right position, which I didn't do, so I'm going with a seam allowance of 1 centimeter here all the way around. Cut back your seam allowance again, quite sharpish where you've got a curve so that you don't have to snip it. Turn it and then cover it with a cloth while you iron it again, so we can now top stitch it all the way around. And if you know that American sockets have much less electricity in them than English or European sockets, so what happened here was the sewing machine was so slow I'd really given up the will to live, so I didn't go around and triple stitch, which I normally would have done. I would recommend that. Next we're going to make the lower part of the bag, so make sure that you put your snips in, and then the flap goes right onto this with a center onto the center snip, and the handle goes either side of it. So really, as long as the flap's in the right position, you can just put them on either side there, but I would recommend that you use more pins to secure it, so one on either side of your handle, because my handle's actually slipped and I had to redo it. Then with the right sides facing, put the upper part of the bag on so that we can construct a 1 centimeter seam allowance seam here. And here you can see me again using just 1 pin, and really you need 2 pins. So upper part over the top again, pin it, and we're ready to sew it together. Make sure that you stick to your seam allowance of 1 centimeter. It does have to be that, and don't let the fabric push, and it will try to push and secure the end. Now with that done, we can put on the volume fleece. I'm using 2 layers of volume fleece because the fabric I use is ordinary quilting fabric and it's a little thin. So laminated fabrics obviously don't need that much volume fleece, but when you use it twice and that sticks in a seam, that will be really thick. So I'm cutting it back a little more just to make sure, and then I iron that on again with a lot of steam, and I cover it with a cloth. So now that I've done that and it's lovely and thick, I'm going to top stitch across here again to make it look much more structural. And again, make sure that you now do the slightly larger stitch length, so we're going back to 3.5 so that it doesn't look homemade. Now we can close the base seam as well, so once across centimeter seam allowance. Don't forget to lock in your stitches at the end of the seam. And guessed it, yo, we're going to top stitch this as well. So go down one side, fix point on your presser foot. It's always where the clear plastic ends on my puff machine. That's a really good point to use. Come back down on the other side. Fold the lot over and now close the side seam. 1 centimeter seam allowance on either side, and we're doing the same on our lining, but we're leaving an opening gap at the lower end. You will find that if you work with fleece like this and you've cut it back, it will try to push, so you need to make sure that you hold your fabric in place. You can see me here leaving a gap in the lining, so secure. Lift over the fabric so you've got hand width so your hand can get in, and then you do the other end. So we've got an open base now. Iron your seams apart. If you used laminated fabric, obviously don't forget to put an ironing cloth over it. Pin it, and then we're going to sew across there, which gives us this lovely base shape to the bag. And we do the same on the lining and across, and the same on the shell fabric. And now I can put my popper in. Now you want to mark the center there, so just make sure your popper's in the right position. Mine obviously isn't because I needed to pull it down a little bit more, so unfortunately my popper sat right on the seam, and it should ideally sit just below the seam. So again, you want to just put 2 tiny little snips in there. There we are. Push through your magnetic closure. Place the little plate on top on the other side. Then move the arms to the outside and your closure is finished. It's dead easy. I really like these magnetic fasteners. That's just so much nicer than a buttonhole. Now we're going to turn the bag inside out. This is really important for many reasons. So when you're working with a bag turned like that and you put your lining in, and the lining is actually a little bit smaller than the outside, they will fit perfectly on top of each other. If you try to work this the other way around, the lining will seem far too small. So I'm sure that when you've made bags before, you kind of thought, oh no, they don't fit together. They're just like one is hugely bigger than the other. And that's when you're working with different fabrics. That will happen because the inside obviously is a bit smaller. So by making the lining a bit smaller, it will sit perfect. So now we can just put that onto the arm of the sewing machine and sew all the way around. I would also stretch the material as you go along. So put one hand at the end, like I'm doing here, and really pull it so that you don't get any pleats or end up with too much at the end. People tend to do that. They have got a little bit left, they'll move the pin out and then keep going, and by the end of it they have got this giant pleat. You want to really stretch that so it fits on perfect, and that will hold the rim of the bag slightly to the inside, which looks great. Now we can turn the bag inside out, and then we just folding in the seam allowances here, and we'll sew them across again. Tuck in your lining and iron it, obviously. And now I'm sliding it back over to sew all the way around the rim. And then I actually did another stitch closer to the top. I'm not sure that was either necessary or made it look any better, but I just thought, oh yeah, I'll do that because on the grown-up bags I do that a lot, but actually I didn't think it looked any better. So whatever you think. So put your base in and you're finished. You can admire your handiwork. You can see how the rim stands really nicely. Close it up and somebody will be very happy to receive this bag, I'm sure. Now you could of course put a zip in this if you're feeling brave. So just go on the project page for frocksandfrolics.com and you'll find 2 versions which include a zipper, and you also find the introduction which tells you what all the other bags are about and where to get the materials. Thank you for watching. Bye.